The alien Discovery Commander Juno's gray face twisted into a smug smile as the atmospheric readings of Earth flashed across the holoscreen. The advanced sensors of the Trill Empire had easily detected the distant blue planet, and what Juno saw filled him with scorn. High concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and industrial pollutants coated the atmosphere. Juno sneered, and his advisors chuckled along with him in the dim light of the massive alien ship's bridge. "The inhabitants are still burning fossil fuels," Juno remarked, his voice dripping with contempt. "How quaint." Advisor Xylo leaned forward, his bulbous eyes narrowing as he examined the data. "Rudimentary space technology at best. They've barely colonized their neighboring red planet. Based on these scans, they're easy pickings." Juno bared his fangs in a predatory grin. "Indeed. We'll add this primitive backwater to our empire and strip it of its resources. They can't hope to resist us." Far below on Earth's surface, a cold sweat broke out on the brow of NASA scientist Eugene Boyd as he stared at the pulsing signal on his screen. The blinking red dot heralded a grim revelation. Hostile aliens had discovered Earth. Eugene's mind raced, a chilling certainty crystallizing in his thoughts. If these aliens decided to attack, humanity was doomed. "This is Dr. Boyd," Eugene said, his voice trembling as he activated the secure communication line. "We have an extinction-level situation. I need to speak to the president now." The year was 2050. Humanity had established tenuous colonies on Mars, but the gulf between the stars remained unbridged. Earth still relied on burning ancient plants for power, and to an advanced spacefaring race, humans would appear primitive. Sitting ducks. As Eugene waited with gritted teeth for the call to connect, he watched the blinking red dot grow closer on his screen. The Titanic alien vessel had entered the solar system, taking up an ominous orbit around Jupiter. He knew with nauseating certainty that they were analyzing Earth and finding it ripe for conquest. When the president's ashen face finally filled the screen, Eugene didn't mince words. "We've been discovered. Their technology is centuries beyond ours. Our carbon dioxide emissions and pollution will make it obvious we can't defend ourselves." He took a breath, his eyes hardening. "Unless we drastically alter our atmospheric profile to fool them?" The president blanched, his voice a strained whisper. "What are you proposing?" Eugene outlined his desperate plan, a frenzied tapping of keys, sending schematics flashing across the screen. "We need to make our atmosphere look far more advanced and dangerous than it is. Seed it with decoy signals and artificial elements. If we can convince them we're more trouble than we're worth to conquer..." The president looked grim. "The other world leaders are torn between attempting to communicate or preparing for war, but you think this deception is our only chance." Eugene nodded firmly. "Trying to fight would be suicide. We have to deter them from attacking in the first place. It's a long shot, but it's the only way to avoid extinction or enslavement." As the alien ship began to move, an ominous blip growing closer on the screen, the president took a deep breath. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. "Whatever you need, Dr. Boyd, make it happen. We're out of time and options." Eugene set his jaw. The most important and desperate scientific effort in human history began now, and failure was not an option. Operation Pinnacle begins. Eugene marched into the secure briefing room, his teeth clenched and eyes blazing with intensity. The president and the assembled Joint Chiefs of Staff swiveled to face him, their expressions a mix of apprehension and desperate hope. "Gentlemen," Eugene began, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment, "the alien ship is bearing down on us. Based on their scans, they believe we're primitive and defenseless." He paused, letting the grim reality sink in. "But I have a plan." With a flick of his wrist, Eugene activated the holographic display. A shimmering image of Earth appeared, surrounded by a dense network of glowing nodes. "We launch a fleet of high-altitude balloons and drones," Eugene explained, gesturing to the nodes, "each carrying a payload of sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, and exotic heavy elements. When dispersed in the upper atmosphere, this cocktail will mimic the signature of a highly advanced civilization." The president leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Advanced how exactly?" Eugene's eyes gleamed. "Nuclear fusion reactors, matter-antimatter power plants, industrial-scale quantum computing." He let out a sharp breath. Technology centuries beyond our current capabilities. Murmurs rippled through the room. The president held up a hand, his gaze locked on Eugene. You're proposing we trick them? Fool them into thinking we're far more advanced than we are? Eugene nodded firmly. It's our only chance. If they believe we're primitive, they'll invade and strip our planet bare. But if we can convince them we're too advanced to be worth the trouble? He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. The president exchanged glances with his advisors, the weight of the decision etched on their faces. After a long, tense moment, he turned back to Eugene. How confident are you this will work? Eugene met his gaze unflinchingly. It's a gamble, but it's the only way to avoid extinction or enslavement. We have to try. The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation pressing down like a physical weight. Finally, the president nodded slowly. Then we have no choice. Operation Pinnacle is a go. The room erupted into a flurry of activity. Eugene barked orders to his team, directing them to assemble the balloon drone fleet and prepare the chemical payloads. The president mobilized the nation's resources, authorizing whatever Eugene needed to make Operation Pinnacle a success. As the countdown to the alien scan ticked away, Eugene and his team worked feverishly. Balloons and drones were loaded with canisters of atmospheric additives, and scientists calibrated the dispersal mechanisms with painstaking precision. With mere hours to spare, Eugene's assistant Ajit burst into the control room, his face ashen. Dr. Boyd, he panted, we have a problem. The Trill are using a spectrographic scanning method we didn't anticipate. We need an additional element to make this work. Promethium. Eugene's blood ran cold. Promethium was incredibly rare, and they had none on hand. How much do we need? At least 500 kilograms, Ajit replied grimly, and we need it dispersed with the other elements. Eugene sucked in a sharp breath. Without Promethium, their entire plan would unravel. The Trill would see through the ruse and realize Earth was ripe for conquest. Find it, Eugene ordered, his voice tight with urgency. I don't care how, but find me that Promethium. We can't fail. As Ajit raced off to secure the elusive element, Eugene turned back to the countdown clock. The numbers seemed to blur before his eyes as the weight of the world pressed down on his shoulders. The desperate search on the Trill ship. Juno watched the scans of Earth with narrowed eyes. The readings were perplexing. Elements and gases that should have been impossible for a primitive species flickered across the screen. This doesn't make sense, Juno muttered, his claws tapping restlessly against the console. If they possess fusion and antimatter technology, our initial assessment was flawed. The science officer nodded, his expression troubled. Perhaps we underestimated them. Additional scans are needed before we proceed. Juno leaned back in his chair, a flicker of doubt creeping into his mind. If the humans were more advanced than they had assumed, conquering Earth might prove far more difficult than anticipated. Back on Earth, Eugene paced the control room, his nerves frayed to the breaking point. The success of Operation Pinnacle hinged on securing the Promethium, and time was running out. Ajit's voice crackled over the radio, breathless and urgent. Dr. Boyd, the Promethium supply is tainted. It's unusable. Eugene's heart seized in his chest. Without Promethium, the entire plan would collapse. The Trill would see through the deception, and Earth would be laid bare. Ajit continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. I checked with the supplier. The batch we received was contaminated during processing. They don't have any more. Eugene banged his head against the console, his mind racing. They were out of options and nearly out of time. If he couldn't find an alternative source of Promethium immediately, Operation Pinnacle would fail, and Earth would be at the mercy of the alien invaders. Eugene smacked his palm on the console, his mind racing. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second bringing Earth closer to potential annihilation. Ajit, he barked, spinning to face his assistant. Get on the horn with every lab, every research facility on the planet. We need Promethium, and we need it now. Ajit nodded grimly, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he fired off urgent messages to their international counterparts. Eugene grabbed his phone, scrolling through his contacts with trembling hands. Come on, he muttered, dialing number after number. Each call ended in failure, his hopes dwindling with every negative response. Just as despair began to set in, his phone lit up with an incoming call. "Eugene, it's Dmitri from Novosibirsk." Eugene's heart leapt. "Dmitri, tell me you have good news. We might have what you need. There's a small cache of promethium at our remote lab in Siberia. It's not much, but it'll have to do." Eugene cut in. "I'm sending a team now. Thank you, my friend. You may have just saved the world." As Eugene dispatched a retrieval squad, alarms blared on the trill ship. Juno leaned forward, his eyes narrowing at the flickering holo display. "These readings can't be accurate," he growled. No pre-FTL civilization could produce such atmospheric anomalies. His science officer, Zix, cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should investigate further before committing to invasion." Juno's claws tapped against his armrest as he considered. "Deploy a stealth probe. If this is some primitive trick, we'll expose it." Back on Earth, Eugene's team worked feverishly to modify a high-speed jet. Technicians swarmed over the aircraft, attaching dispersion canisters and calibrating release mechanisms. "We'll have one shot at this," Eugene told the pilot. "Hit that atmospheric window dead on, or we're all doomed." As the jet prepared for takeoff, Eugene's comm crackled to life. "Dr. Boyd, we have a problem. Blizzard conditions in Siberia. Our bird's grounded." Eugene's blood ran cold. No, he whispered. Then inspiration struck. "Get me the Russian Weather Service." Minutes later, a high-altitude weather balloon ascended into the stratosphere, carrying its precious cargo of promethium. Eugene watched its progress on the tracking system, sweat beading on his brow. In low Earth orbit, the Trill probe silently began its scan, its sensors probing deep into the atmosphere, collecting data that would determine humanity's fate. The balloon reached dispersal altitude just as the probe's scan neared completion. With a soft pop, the canister detonated, releasing a cloud of promethium that mixed with the cocktail of elements already seeded in the atmosphere. On the Trill ship, Juno stared in disbelief at the incoming data. "Impossible," he breathed. "These readings suggest technology far beyond anything we've encountered in this sector." He turned to his advisors, conflict evident in his eyes. "We can't risk engaging a civilization of this level. The potential losses would be catastrophic." With great reluctance, Juno gave the order. "Abort the invasion. Set course for the outer system. We'll need to reassess our entire strategy for this sector." As the massive alien vessel turned away from Earth, cheers erupted in mission control. Eugene slumped in his chair, exhaustion and relief washing over him in equal measure. "We did it," Ajit said, his voice filled with awe. "We actually fooled them." Eugene nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the retreating blip on the scanner. "For now," he said softly. "But this is just the beginning. We've bought ourselves time, but we can't waste it. The universe is bigger and more dangerous than we ever imagined, and we need to be ready for what comes next." The battle for Earth Eugene's office buzzed with frantic activity as he paced back and forth, barking orders into his comm unit. The massive holographic display at the center of the room showed the coalition vessel's inexorable approach, a menacing red blip crawling ever closer to Earth. "I want every AEDC ship recalled immediately," Eugene commanded, his voice tight with tension. "Divert all power to the orbital defense platforms and get me a direct line to the Security Council." Ajit, now Eugene's chief of staff, rushed into the room, clutching a datapad. "Sir, we finished decrypting more of Juno's transmission. You need to see this." Eugene snatched the pad, his eyes widening as he skimmed the contents. "Christ," he muttered. "They've been watching us this whole time." The pad clattered to the desk as Eugene turned to address the room. "Listen up, people. The Coalition has been monitoring our progress for years. They know about the antimatter research, the quantum computing breakthroughs, everything. We can't afford to underestimate them." A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the office as Eugene's staff redoubled their efforts. He turned back to the holo display, studying the approaching vessel. Its sheer size dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed. "Sir," a young technician called out, "we're receiving telemetry from the Jupiter defense grid. The alien ship it's accelerating." Eugene felt his stomach drop. "Time to intercept?" The technician swallowed hard. "At current speed, less than 6 hours." The room fell silent as the magnitude of the situation sank in. Eugene took a deep breath, steadying himself. All right, this is what we've been preparing for. Ajit, alert all AEDC personnel. We're initiating Protocol Omega. Ajit's eyes widened. Sir, are you sure? We don't have a choice. Eugene cut him off. It's now or never. As Ajit hurried to carry out the order, Eugene turned to address his command staff. I need status reports from every department, weapons, shields, communications, everything. We're going to throw everything we've got at these bastards. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Eugene coordinated with military leaders around the globe, mobilizing Earth's defenses. The orbital platforms hummed to life, their massive energy weapons charged and ready. Deep in secret bunkers, scientists made final adjustments to experimental technologies, reverse-engineered from the Trill data. As the coalition ship entered the inner solar system, Eugene stood before the United Nations Security Council. His voice rang out clear and resolute. For 10 years, we've worked tirelessly to prepare for this moment. We've made incredible strides, pushing the boundaries of science and technology. But make no mistake, we are facing an enemy of unprecedented power and ruthlessness. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled world leaders. The road ahead will be difficult. We may suffer terrible losses, but I promise you this. Humanity will not go quietly into the night. We will fight with everything we have, and we will prevail. As Eugene finished speaking, alarms blared throughout the AEDC command center. He rushed back to his post where Ajit waited with a grim expression. They've entered Mars orbit, Ajit reported. Our outer defense line is engaging now. Eugene watched the holodisplay as humanity's first line of defense opened fire on the alien behemoth. Energy beams and antimatter warheads streaked across space, impacting the coalition ship in a dazzling light show. For a moment, hope surged through Eugene's chest. Then the smoke cleared, revealing the alien vessel virtually unscathed. It returned fire, and Eugene could only watch in horror as the Mars defense grid was obliterated in a matter of seconds. All ships, fall back to secondary positions, Eugene ordered, his voice hoarse. Concentrate fire on their weapon systems. As Earth's fledgling space fleet engaged the invaders in a desperate battle above the Red Planet, Eugene turned to Ajit. Status on Protocol Omega. Ajit consulted his datapad. The package is ready for deployment, sir, but are you sure about this? The risks, we're out of options, Eugene cut him off. Humanity's survival is at stake. Give the order. As Ajit relayed the command, Eugene stared at the looming shape of the coalition vessel on the holodisplay. In mere hours, the fate of Earth would be decided. He only hoped the gamble they were about to take would be enough to turn the tide. The final gamble. The AEDC command center erupted into chaos as alarms blared. Eugene Boyd stood at the center of the storm, his eyes fixed on the massive holographic display showing the coalition fleet's approach. "Status report!" he barked, his voice cutting through the din. A young officer spoke up, her voice tight with tension. Sir, multiple energy signatures detected. The coalition fleet is entering the outer system. Eugene's expression hardened. Alert all orbital batteries. Bring the defense grid online. I want every AEDC warship ready for immediate deployment. The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Eugene coordinated Earth's defenses, his voice steady as he issued orders to ships and stations across the system. Suddenly, a blinding flash lit up the display. Eugene squinted, his heart sinking as he realized what he was seeing. Mars defense platforms are down, an analyst called out. Coalition flagship just took them out with some kind of energy weapon. Before Eugene could respond, another officer shouted, Sir, we're detecting multiple smaller craft breaking off from the main fleet. They're heading for the inner system. Eugene leaned in, studying the tactical readouts. They're going for our lunar bases and asteroid facilities. Dispatch intercept squadrons immediately. As AEDC ships scrambled to meet the threat, Eugene made a fateful decision. Prepare the antimatter missiles. We're taking a shot at their flagship. The missiles launched, streaking across space toward the massive alien vessel. For a moment, hope surged through the command center. Then the missiles impacted, and Eugene's heart sank. No effect, an officer reported. Their shields absorbed the blast. Before Eugene could issue new orders, the world around him exploded. The command station rocked violently as coalition weapons found their mark. "We've lost primary power," someone shouted. "Hull breach on decks 3 through 7. Eugene grabbed a nearby console to steady himself. "Evacuation order. All personnel to escape pods. We're abandoning the station." Minutes later, Eugene found himself aboard the AEDC battlecruiser Defiant, watching helplessly as Mars fell to the alien onslaught. The Red Planet's antimatter facilities, Earth's ace in the hole, were now in enemy hands. "We can't let them push any further," Eugene growled. He turned to his XO. "Prep our drone fleet for kamikaze runs. We need to slow them down." The drones launched, slamming into coalition ships in fiery explosions. It bought them time, but at a terrible cost. As the titanic battle raged on, Eugene paced the Defiant's bridge, an idea beginning to form. A risky move that might turn the tide. "Get me a secure line to special operations," he ordered. "We're going to hit them where it hurts." The Trojan horse hours later, Eugene stood in the cramped hold of an old AEDC freighter, surrounded by a hand-picked team of Marines and engineers. The ship's nuclear reactor hummed ominously, modified to serve as a Trojan horse. "This is our one shot," Eugene told his team. "We get aboard that flagship, we take it out from the inside. For Earth." The freighter burned hard toward the coalition command ship, weaving through the chaos of battle. They docked undetected, and all hell broke loose. Eugene led the charge through alien corridors, the sounds of gunfire and alien shrieks echoing around them. They fought their way toward the engine core, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Just as victory seemed within reach, everything went sideways. Alien troops swarmed them from hidden compartments, cutting down Eugene's team with precision fire. Eugene found himself dragged before Juno, the alien commander, sneering down at him. "Your pathetic resistance ends here, human," Juno gloated. "You will serve as an example to your kind." But before Juno could carry out his threat, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared as a massive explosion tore through the vessel. In the chaos that followed, Eugene watched in awe as the mighty coalition fleet began to retreat. They had won this battle, but he knew the war was just getting started. The aftermath.